Introduction. Recently, I met a young pastor whom I've come to admire. In just a couple of years, he has revitalized his parish. His parishioners love him, both for his dynamic preaching and, more importantly, for the way he witnesses to God's love for us. Yet, he confided to me, I am more sure that God has called me to be a priest than I am of God's personal love for me. His honesty saddened and comforted me. I was saddened for what he suffers, but I was comforted because he reminded me that I'm not the only one to have devastating doubts harass my joy and peace. All of us at times share in this struggle to believe that God loves us. It becomes particularly urgent or painful when we experience personal tragedy, attempt to cope with loss, or confront our inner darkness and sinfulness. And for some of us, this kind of doubt about our own lovability is not occasional, but a painful way of life. This little book grew out of my own struggles to accept God's love for me and develop a positive self-esteem. Discovering God's love has taken me on an amazing journey, from self-hate to a positive self-acceptance. I wish I'd had a resource like this at the beginning of my journey, something that could have helped me cling to this seemingly impossible reality of God's love for me. Like many people, I have struggled with low self-esteem for much of my life. For years, I naively thought that others didn't have this struggle. I just knew that ever since I could remember, I felt inadequate to life's challenges, ashamed of revealing anything about myself, because others would find out how shallow and unworthy of being loved I really was. The simple challenges of everyday life were enough to cue taunting voices of self-doubt or even self-hate. I was rarely at ease with myself. Trying something new was incredibly anxiety-provoking. By the time I was a teenager, low self-esteem had become a distorted mirror that prevented me from being able to see myself honestly, despite the love of my family and friends, my good grades at school, and the volunteer work I enjoyed. Although I could not clearly recognize my gifts, I did allow them to lead me to my vocation, and I eventually entered religious life. But in my preparation to become a daughter of St. Paul, I continued to doubt that I was lovable. My doubts ran so deep that, despite how important to me my relationship with God was becoming, I still didn't believe God could love me. I needed to experience being loved unconditionally by someone who could not be wrong about me, someone whose judgment was unquestionable and whose fidelity I could cling to. As I continued to deepen my relationship with God, guided by the wisdom and gentleness of my spiritual director, I realized that the only way I could indisputably challenge my relentless self-doubt was to discover who I was in God's eyes. With help from the classes and personal guidance I received, I gradually came to identify the root of my lack of self-confidence as poor self-esteem. I also became aware of how low self-esteem prevented me from being at peace with myself and caused me to live in a state of high anxiety. My first big breakthrough was a powerful and intimate prayer experience in which I gazed into the eyes of Jesus and discovered how cherished I was. The Lord's no conditions asked, immensely personal love for me was powerfully healing and transforming. Little by little, I found my shame and self-hatred diminishing. I began to experience the world with less fear and more joy. I also realized that while I could come to the truth about myself within my relationship with God, I needed to accompany my meditation on God's love with some necessary personal inner work. Low self-esteem had warped my perceptions not only of myself, but also of God and others. Small events of daily life could trigger a disproportionate emotional response in me. I realized that I needed help to come to terms with my past, and I began counseling.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?